Right, now it's a difficult time for all of us in the UK right now, but we can bring you some good news from Wuhan in China, where the virus started.
Well, after 76 days in lockdown, residents are now allowed to leave their homes and move around the city. ITV news correspondent Debi Edward joins us now from Wuhan. And hi, Debi. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can you tell us what has begun to happen in Wuhan today?
Well, people for the first time in 76 days have been allowed to leave Wuhan. The train station behind me is open, the airport is open and the city border is open. And from midnight, people were going across the border in their cars and leaving from the train station, obviously keen to get to home. Many of them have been displaced since the lockdown began on the 23rd of January. But unfortunately, it is not everybody that is free to move in Wuhan. There are still several communities where there have been new cases in the last few days and people that are still restricted to just 2 hours a day being allowed to go out of their homes. So it's not an opening of the floodgates here, but certainly a positive move here today.
And Debi, obviously you're still wearing a mask there and people behind you are walking around with masks, also still protecting themselves. Is that a worry that actually this virus could come back, or there's still potentially a case of getting reinfected with the virus?
Both of those things, really, yeah. There is a nervousness here about a potential for a second wave and a potential for more infections as people move around again. And there are virus cases, of course, still present here in the city, but the masks are required to be worn. The Wuhan government put out a reminder today that for those going out, that they should be wearing a mask in public. And it's really a sign of respect to others and a sense of reassurance as well that it provides here in Wuhan. And in fact, we've been wearing them too on the streets of Beijing.
They don't look like they're social distancing behind you.
They're not, actually, yeah, and we've just been actually to get tested for going back to Beijing, and we were in a hospital and we were very much not social distancing, and that was making us quite nervous. And I think perhaps the wearing of the mask and the checking of the temperatures and the checking of your health all the time is perhaps making people more reassured about that. And it's not something that's really been enforced here, apart from at the shops where there are those markers that we now see in the UK trying to keep people at least a metre or two apart.
So, Debi, what about these exotic wildlife markets where we know that this originated from in the first place? We've been hearing reports that they've actually reopened.
No, that's not correct. These wild markets, the government acted, I guess, eventually quite quickly to shut them down, but only temporarily. It's got a law in force that's not permanent, but I think the government will be feeling pressure now to make that a permanent move. We drove past today the wildlife market where this epidemic apparently began, and it is certainly closed down and will remain so for at least the foreseeable, if not forever.
You've spent a lot of time there. You know the culture, you know the traditions. It's very difficult to change the course of an entire country when it comes to Chinese medicine, when it comes to those long-standing traditions. But the world, I think, is going to begin to say, you have to change because look what that did to us. Do you think that the population would be open to the permanent closure of those exotic markets?
I think they will, yes. I think people have seen how the world has reacted to that, and there has been some anger at that, yes, but I think people here are really wanting to move beyond the epidemic, and certainly people in Wuhan today, they are emerging from their homes, and there's still a lot of anger about what was allowed to happen here, about the lockdown not coming quick enough, about the advice to them not being quick enough, and as a result, losing friends and family and getting infected themselves. So I think part of that will put pressure on the government to act and to perhaps ban these markets forever.
All right, thank you,
Debi.
Debi.
Thank you very much
for joining us. Right, we can also go live now to Connor Reed, who lives in Wuhan and was the first British person to contract COVID-19 at the end of last year. So, Connor, thank you for joining us. You've been in lockdown since the 23rd of January, only allowed to leave the apartment for groceries. You have experienced your first outing. I imagine those were quite tentative steps, weren't they?
It is, but also we're very happy to be coming out because it's been a long time inside. Sort of just going out for a walk's sake without having an actual destination has definitely been refreshing.
You were reportedly the first Brit to contract COVID-19, a school teacher fired for speaking out, and then obviously the wheels fell off the world and we all found out, you know, quite what we were all facing. For you, obviously very early on in lockdown, being away from everybody, being separated, how have you managed to keep your head sane?
That's the thing, that when you come to a country like this, you expect to be by yourself. You're the foreigner in the country. So I haven't found that part very difficult. However, the being without my family and stuff has been a challenge.
And how have you filled your time?
Well, I've done everything that you could think of. I've played Monopoly. I've drew pictures. I'm learning Russian. One day I kept my arm up for as long as possible, just because it was something to do during the day. It's quite a challenge to keep yourself stimulated for 70 days.
And so are you concerned being there, now everybody's sort of venturing out for the first time? Do you worry that it could come back, that people could get it again? Do you have concerns about that?
No, I'm not. Everybody that's outside has a special QR code that signifies they're healthy. If they didn't have the QR code, they wouldn't be allowed outside. So we know that everybody in the city is healthy, and the only reported cases are from foreigners coming into the city. Everybody in the city natively is healthy now. They've eradicated the virus.
We've seen pictures and been surprised and disappointed by the amount of people who've actually broken the lockdown here and taken journeys that were unnecessary, whether or not you agree with it or disagree with it, sort of sunbathing in parks and beaches and that sort of stuff. Do you think the compliance of the Chinese population has helped to slow down the spread?
Absolutely. The Chinese people love their government. If the government asked them to jump, they'd ask how high. So when something like this happens, they come together as a people and deal with it together. And people really don't want to be the odd one out going outside when everybody else isn't. So I do believe that in a society like this, that it's more effective and it could be managed much better than the UK.
Connor, you are now out. You've been 76 days in isolation. You're walking out now. A lot of people here are going to be eventually feeling the same sort of moment when you are venturing out and, as you say, walking somewhere without actually having a destination in mind. Do you think it'll be weird to reintegrate yourself back into normal life?
Yeah, so the social side, I live alone, so my social skills are probably at an all-time low. I really haven't been speaking with anyone at all. I do think something like this is going to affect a society for a longer period of time. It's not going to be a case of snapping your fingers, quarantine's over, back to normal. It will be a learning process. At the moment, businesses and families are sort of picking up the pieces and trying to recover now. So although the quarantine's over, the virus is gone, this is now the recovery stage where people are getting back together.
All right, Connor, you stay safe. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.